Alrighty, Lumberjacks, welcome back to another episode of FDR Logging, because that is who we are and that is what we're doing. Last time we were playing, I can't actually remember what we were doing. Processing, probably, or about to process. We probably loaded some logs. I have loaded this truck and this trailer and this with this loader from this spot like 10 gazillion times because I've been doing a bunch of testing, but I am so happy that I'm finally on this episode where I can load this truck up and never see this pile again, because this is like the 10 gazillionth time that we're doing this. But before I load the truck, we're going to have a little lesson today. We're going to have a teaching lesson and basically a little physics lesson. So I get this question all the time talking about people having issues with logs. The logs are sliding, or they're having problems with the logs jittering, or the machines are acting weird or misbehaving. So a lot of people, I tell them, check your frame rate. Frame rate's the big issue with this game and basic relation to the physics. So frame rate. So you probably hear this from video games. If you're brand new to video games or you don't know what that is, so your frame rate is your frames per second, your FPS, as some people say. So the higher your frame rate, the smoother your gameplay. The lower your frame rate, the more jerky your gameplay. So the definition from Google, it says the frame rate, your FPS, is the number of images that appear on the screen in each second in a video game. So again, it describes how a higher FPS is a smoother gameplay and a lower FPS is a very jerky kind of gameplay. So the optimal gameplay quality is 60 frames a second. So right now I have the developer console on, so if I hit F2, you see up in the top corner where it says in green 60 FPS. So ideally, you want to keep Farming Simulator above, well, I mean, if you can keep it at 60 the whole time, excuse me, if you can keep it at 60 the whole time, that'd be fantastic. But ideally, you don't want it dropping below 30. I mean, below 40 even starts to get a little rough. But this game's physics and how the physics react and operate are solely dependent on your frame rate. So up in the top right corner, we have a nice smooth 60 frames a second, meaning if I go into, wrong machine. If I hop into this loader and I'm waving my arm around, you see like little jumps where it'll drop from 60 down to 59. But everything's pretty smooth, right? Like when I pick up the logs, it's smooth. When I drop the logs, it's smooth. You know, everything looks really smooth while we're operating, so that you get a really good, clean experience with the physics. So again, for those not educated in this, while playing this game, there is a visual layer, which we're seeing, which is all of this stuff that we see, and then underneath there is a physics layer. I described this in other videos. And then the physics layer is this layer where all this orange stuff is. And all these orange pieces that we're looking at are collisions on the physics level. And these are what interact with anything. So our machine has physics. It's got the body, it's got the physics on the arms, the grapple. Each individual claw has its own physics set and collisions and all that stuff. And then our logs have their own physics, and the trailer has its own physics, and everything has basically its own little physics world. And all of that has to get calculated by your computer and your graphics card and all of that fun. So if you have a lower tier computer, like a non-good computer, like a crappy one, or a really low quality parts or old computer, what's going to happen is your game cannot render this stuff as well as a better computer. So what'll happen is that number in the corner, that frame rate will drop down much lower. And the lower that frame rate goes, the more insane the logs will react, the more insane the physics will react. They act jittery or jerky, and then you have problems. So I'm going to give you guys a demonstration of what happens between the two. So right now, again, we're at a nice smooth 60 frames a second. So if I go grab this load of logs, it's so smooth and nice. So we grab them, we can pencil them, we can load them. So let's put this on this bunk right here and just dump them in there. So nice and smooth, right? Not really any issues. Everything's really nice and responsive, and the physics are all chill. Now, if I turn on physics mode, because that's the only way I can really get my physics or my frame rate to drop, watch what happens. So physics mode, physics mode. So now I'm running at 23 frames a second. So that's how much it updates. And as you can see, just moving my boom around and my grapple, it's already laggy and kind of jittery and doesn't feel good or look good. So now if I go to pick up logs, watch what happens. They're going to just act stupid. They're going to be slippery and they're laggy and they're just weird. So again, as I move my boom side to side, you can see they're kind of sliding around, they're jerking around, they're not really operating like properly. They look kind of weird. So this is at low frame rate, and at low frame rate, the physics are updating to match your frame rate. So the physics are calculating your frame rate based on how many times they update in a cycle. So as I turn, you see how it's like just jerky and weird. I can still get a half decent grip on the log, so it's not terrible, but like you do this for too long and oh my god, it's a bad experience. But what'll happen is you'll notice other things. So the tracks, for instance, if I swing this head around, you see what the tracks are doing? See how they jump around and they act all crazy like that? So that's, again, the physics trying to update to a low frame rate, and it's just a bad experience across the board. So when I hear people asking about frame rate and its importance with the actual game, it's a big reason people have problems with mods. And it's not just my mods, you know, with other people's mods or in-game equipment. But yeah, your whole logging, your whole operating, your whole physics experience is going to be a lot worse if you have a lower frame rate. So as you can see, operating like this, it's doable, but it's not great. And the other thing is, if you have a crappy computer and it's just the way it goes, you don't have another one, there's options. So one, you could go into your graphics settings and put everything to low as you can get it, crank everything down. And also, if you're still having really bad frame rate, operate slower. Can't tell people this one enough. Big thing, settings. I think it's under this settings here, or is it game settings? Sorry, one sec. So under general settings, I believe, you see where it says vehicle arm sensitivity? Keep it at 100% or even lower. The lower your frame rate, keep that percentage even lower. I had this conversation with one of our guys on our logging crew. So if I could lock this out to keep it at 100% so no one could touch it, I absolutely would for my mods. Too many people go and they crank this up really high to like 200%. Oh man, you can even go higher. I didn't even know you could go to 300. That's disgusting. But what happens, let's give you an example. So if I put it at 300%, I'm going to turn physics mode off because it's going to be a nightmare. My claws and my grapples are overreactive. Like, that is crazy. So they are oversensitive and they act like insane. It's crazy. So like, that's another big issue. I see some people crank up their graphics settings and then they wonder why the machines are operating horribly, and they crank up their speeds, and it's like, yeah, it's funny if you want to have like a joke episode where you smash the living crap out of everything, but in general settings, under settings, keep the vehicle arm sensitivity 100 or lower. These machines are built and designed by me to run at 100. If you run over 100 and you have problems, that's your problem, not mine. If you run under, you're probably even going to have a smoother experience. But honestly, you can operate very fluidly and very efficiently in this speed. A lot of people think it's too slow. I've had that in emails. I've had that from crew members. I've had that all over the place. And I just want to yell at people and be like, guys, slow down. You're operating. Because one, this isn't real life. So the physics are going to work how they're going to work. And if you try to abuse the physics by cranking up the speed, you're going to have a bad time. It's not going to work out well. So that's the importance of your frame rate in connection to the physics. The lower your frame rate, the crappier your performance. So again, to mitigate that issue, what you can do is you can lower your graphics, go into your game settings under graphics, set your quality to lower, much lower if it's really bad. And then try to play with the settings. Increase it with time, increase it over time, and it'll go back up again. Your frame rate will go up and down based on what you set your graphics at. Because even mine will drop out sometimes depending on how much logs are interacting with each other, or whether you're sometimes hosting in multiplayer games, it'll do it. So I thought that was a really good episode note because I feel I get that question a lot where people are like, oh, the machines just slide around or the logs slide around. Well, as you can see right now, nothing's sliding around all crazy, everything's smooth, and people think I have like some kind of special cheat code. I have a half decent computer. I mean, I don't know, I think it's still decent. It's kind of old now probably for what some people think, but I mean, I have what, a 3080 Ti, which I think is probably old now because I think they're in the 5 series or 4. I don't know. I don't keep up with those anymore. But I mean, I know lots of guys that run way lower quality machines than I do. But the key is you can't, if you're going to buy a cheaper PC, you're not going to have as good of graphics. That's it. And I know it's bang for your buck and all that, but you have to play the game based on your PC's level of ability. And if you try to play above it, it's not going to be a good experience. So if you guys are having issues with jittery logs or jittery equipment or machines acting really weird and wild and uncontrollable, it's probably your settings. It's not probably, it's definitely your settings. So as you can see, I'm loading just fine. Everything's very smooth. I don't have the logs freaking out. They're going on there nice. And again, I am loading slowly. I'm taking my time. I'm not rushing. This game is not super great when you have the settings too high. Oops, we won't count that log. When you have the settings way too high, it will glitch out. And the biggest one is people saying like when they clamp down on logs, they like jitter really bad. See, now I don't really have that issue. If you get weird shaped logs like this stupid little one here with the point that I shouldn't even put in here, I should have chucked it to the side, then sometimes it will react poorly. But for like 99% of the logging experience, not having any of these issues. Zero. And I'm not using any magic cheat code. Jesus, excuse me. Just got a frog in my throat every day. That's because I record these videos in the morning sometimes and I'm like not quite fully throat cleared. Oops, jeez. Yeah, so that's a big one. That's a big one I want people to be aware of. I'm actually going to put this episode as an FAQ on my website because honestly, it is a really constant question that I get. And it's all performance related. This game is entirely performance related. Need to have a smooth performance for everything to run good. And lots of people say, oh, the logs don't act like that. This is all staged or it's AI. Actually, that's what we say it was AI. I was like, that's amazing. Thank you. I actually take that as a compliment. But no, it's not AI. You guys are watching me do this right live while I'm playing the game. And all I'm doing is, one, have my graphics set at the right level. Like, I don't have my graphics fully cranked up either. I have them, like, lowered in a lot of places because there's lots of stuff that abuses the game. Oh, let's turn this the other way. Some people wanted to see my graphic settings. Maybe we'll do that at the end of the videos. I'm going to show you guys what my graphic settings are at. Towards the end, I'm going to do that. What I'll do is I'll tab out of the game or close the game and then reopen it, and I'll show you guys my graphic settings. And then I will maybe post, I'll try to remember to post my graphics or my my stats for my computer in the notes or something. If I don't put them in the notes and you want to know what they are and I forget, just make a comment saying where the hell are the stats, and I'll be like, oh right, and then I'll post them. Sometimes I get busy and forget things. But yeah, I don't have my graphics fully cranked either. I think they're higher, but people think there's some kind of magical stuff going on here, and there isn't. This is just gameplay. There's no mods that affect the quality of the graphics or anything like that. This is all just stock goodies. So, this is just giant stock. Well, I mean, stock graphics. Obviously, the mods we're using are the mods, but... oh, yeah. That's a good, satisfying little bit there. So, give that a tap. Oh. Didn't think that one was going to clear. We'll put that one back over there. It's so nice to have this pile done, though. I'm so happy about that. because I literally have been redoing this pile so many times. And now it's finally loaded. It's like a checkpoint in life where we made it. And if any of you were watching my lives on TikTok, you guys have watched how many times I've done this. It's insane. It's uncomfortably insane. Oops, there we go. So I have my pedals pointing in the right direction. We'll just run all of this over. We're going to have to pick it all up anyway. We'll come through with that grinder and clean up those tops eventually. And then we got all those logs to load. And just nothing but loading. It'll be good. But yeah, frame rate. It's all about the frame rate, man. I'm telling you. So, and I sympathize, you know, like not everybody can buy a very crazy expensive PC. But if you cannot afford a like higher quality or even a mid-range PC and you're running on a dirt duster of a PC, then you have to turn down your graphics as low as you go to get a smoother experience. And even then, if your computer is too old or too terrible, even the lowest graphics settings, you might still have a rough experience. It's possible. The other thing is resolution. Lowering your screen resolution, that helps a lot with frame rate as well. The higher your resolution for your screen, so if you're running a big 4K monitor and you're trying to run the game at 4K, sometimes that'll kill your frame rate. If you drop it down to like 1920 by 1080 for your resolution, yeah, it's not going to look as good, but you will have a better gaming experience for the frame rate. I wish we could have it all. That's always the case, right? I wish we could have crappy, cheap PCs and the best playing experience on Earth, but that's just not how reality works, man. You got to spend the money to have the fun, I suppose. Ooh, you get that? There we go. But yeah. So anyway, I think this is good. This is a good episode for teaching. And with previous updates, it's also log frictions and stuff come into play. So I have been working so hard to get the log frictions set properly. And what I mean by friction is how slippery the logs are. So for instance, in my grapple, like when they're on each other, they seem to be all right. But when I pick up an individual log in the grapple, it'll be pretty slick. So if I grab this one, let's see if I can get that out of there. They also do that. See how they magnet to each other? See how that log's stuck to that log? And then you have to wait a second, and then sometimes it just falls off. But not in this case. That's just a weird FS25 Giants thing. I'm glad I got that on video, actually. There you go. Finally fell off. But they kind of stick to each other. So if you're playing with grapples, this is good training too. So if you're playing with grapples, if you have the grapple fully closed, crunched on the log, it's not going to go anywhere. It's pretty sturdy. Like it's not going to slide out of there. But if I back off the grapple a little bit, it's going to be like KY jelly on that log. It's going to slide around like nothing. And in real life, honestly, there's not a lot of grip on them either. It's probably a lot more than this game because this game's obviously you're dealing with solid objects. In real life, wood has a little bit of give to it. It's got bark, it's got resistance, it's got all kinds of stuff. In this game, it's either 100% or 0. So, like I said, this log right here, as you can see, if I tilt it to any direction, I open the grapple a teeny bit, she starts to slide. So you got to keep that grapple nice and tight, squeezed on it. But I have some people saying like, oh, the logs just slip right out of the grapple. Well, you got to bite down more, or it could be a frame rate issue. Those are the other things. Because in low frame rate, the logs are way more slippery. So for instance, like if I move this side, like even at this speed, you can see they barely move, right? But if I turn my physics on and I move, you see how they slide right out of the grapple, and I'm barely moving it. It's just slipping right out of there like it's nothing, right? But then I turn the physics back off, so my frame rate's back up, and suddenly it's fine again. So it's like, oh, well, that was actually a bad example because I moved too quickly. But point being, the lower your frame rate, the more slippery the logs will react, the more jerky the physics will react, and then you'll get a poor experience from it. Now, the reason that these logs are as slippery as they are is because, for whatever reason, in FS25, the logs don't want to settle at base frictions. So, basically, for instance, right now, if I grab this little pile of logs and I pick it up and I drop it into this pile, the logs actually settle out quite nicely. Like, see how they all kind of fell down into the bunk, and I can, push them around, I can slide them around, and they all sit kind of like flush onto each other. Now, when I had stock physics from the base game, with the frictions higher, what would happen is I'd take like a grapple off the truck like this. I'd pick it up, grab it, and one issue was it wouldn't roll up into the grapple. Like, you couldn't get it. It would get hung up, and you'd have like 2 logs stuck side by side instead of like a nice roll like this. But when I went to dump them into the bunks, they wouldn't slide down and settle like these are. Like, you see how they rolled down and settled all nicely? You'd basically plunk it down, and it would just slowly build this mountain of where you dumped it, and they'd never fall down because they were just so sticky and they'd stick to each other. So I've kind of found this in-between place where the logs, yes, are slippery, but they roll up nicely, they settle nicely, they're really easy to load, and that was my main goal, was to make them like half decently easy to load, as opposed to them like, oh man, there was a live stream I did where I fought with a bunk for probably 15 minutes trying to load just two bunks like this, and that's a long time. 15 minutes is forever loading a bunk, and basically the issue was like they wouldn't settle. So like I'd put them into the bunk. See how nice these are, all stacked in a nice brick together. They're all blocked in. Basically what was happening is like one would go sideways and point, and then you'd have to sit here and like bang the bunks, and you'd have to push and squeeze and try to get it to, and it wouldn't settle. It would just be like you were just fighting with a pile of dry broken sticks, and they just wouldn't settle. And that just ruins the experience, because there's nothing more satisfying than like that grab. Even like that's a very satisfying grab where it's a nice big pile, and you go dump it in there, and see how they just fall down and they settle. You barely have to do anything. You can give them a little bump, maybe make them settle a little smoother if you want. But yeah, everything settles in the bunks. And from my own personal real life loading and unloading experience, there's very few times where you have to really fight with the logs. It does happen occasionally when you get weird sized logs or broken bits with pulp and stuff, but for the most part, when you drop the logs on the ground or in a pile or in a deck, they all settle together. May not be perfect every time, but it's pretty good. And that was the main experience I was having in this game that was making me frustrated, because you couldn't get a nice roll like I just did right now. You wouldn't be able to roll the logs like that. And as you guys know, I am obsessive compulsive with the grapples. I really, loading is my most favorite thing in this game, and I really want that to be a good experience. So yes, logs might be a little slippery, but they act more realistically in terms of loading that way. So that is a sacrifice that I am willing to make. Slipperier logs for better times. I'm so glad that we were slowly cleaning this up, though, because that was a lot of stuff. Let's delete that. How much do we think that's going to be worth? Probably like, ooh, I want to say 60 grand at least. What do we say? 366. That's not bad. We'll probably get this back out there, and we'll be running out of time here. So yeah, this was a great episode to tell you guys about frame rate. Frame rate's a big deal. It really is a big deal. So save up your money, buy a better computer, you'll get a better experience. Lower your graphics settings, you'll get a better experience if you're having issues with frame rate. But check your frame rate. So right now, like I said, if I hit F2, oops, I missed my road here. If I hit F2, I have that, and that's a developer console command thing. So if you don't have developer mode on, the other way is Steam. So through Steam, I think it's in the settings. If not, just Google it, how to turn on my FPS counter in Steam. And there'll be a guide there of how to do it. I think it's just in the settings from that like shift tab menu or whatever that comes up. You have like an in-game menu. So if you set that frame rate counter, it'll look similar to that. Might be up in the top left corner or something, but you can see what your frame rate is. And if you're getting that frame rate dumping down into the low 40s or 30s, that could be part of the reason why you're having a bad experience, right? Oh, right, and I was going to show you guys my settings. So I'm going to get this truck all the way back over here. Let's go park it here. I don't even know what we're going to do here. Maybe I'm just going to leave it. Whatever. Maybe we'll do a double load where we put some shorts and longs or something. Let's just go park it way off over in here, and we'll figure it out next round. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And in order for you guys to see what my graphics settings look like, I actually have to quit the game and then reopen the game so that I can show you guys from the main menu. I wish you could do your graphics settings in-game, like while you're playing, but unfortunately that's always been a no-go feature. So I went over the settings menu in my intro, I think, to FS25, went over the settings and all that fun stuff, but this is a good go over. So again, from the main menu, go to options down here. Then it's this kind of computer looking thing with the cog symbol. So hardware profile is basically your overall settings that you can set your game to. So you can change that from like high to low to whatever you want. I leave mine at very high. I think I have custom settings, which I probably just screwed up because I just did that whole thing. So if you're having problems, lower this to a lower setting. Also, your screen resolution. So mine's running basically at 4K, or like a variant of native 4K, and it runs pretty smoothly. But if you're having like a horrible time, or it's like really gross and crappy FPS, lower that down a little bit, maybe 1920 by 1080. That's a pretty common monitor type. Frame rate limit. So a frame rate limit, I set my 60. You can crank it up higher if you really want to. I just leave it at 60 to keep it smooth. Windowed mode, that doesn't really matter for you guys. Resolution scaling, that's another thing. So that upscales and downscales the actual rendered resolution, which is like the texture quality, the image quality, all the quality. So if you lower that down by quite a bit, it'll look grainier and uglier in the game, but it'll be higher frame rate for certain. So down here, you also have the option to go under your advanced graphics. You can click that. So again, you can set your hardware profile to high, very high, all of the above. So this is all stuff you guys can play with. You can lower these settings as low as they'll go. The best way is if you're having like low frame rate and you got a crappy computer, just lower everything here in this giant list as low as you can go. Like, see, everything's set very high, very high, very high, very high. I have some things that are not, some things are lower. There's upscaling stuff you can play with as well that can give you a better experience. Anti-aliasing, turning that off. Like I said, multi-sampling is a good one to turn off. But like, there's unlimited things in here for you to basically screw with to try to play with your settings. So go through here, lower stuff as low as it'll go, and then work your way up. So what I used to do when I had a really crappy computer is I'd come into a settings menu of a game like this. I'd put everything to 0 or as low as it would go. And then I would slowly turn things on and play the game, turn things on, play the game until I found it looking half decent without it actually being unplayable. It's a very tedious process, but if you're really lazy and don't want to deal with all that, just change your hardware profile at the top to like low or high or whatever, and try the different settings. Go into the game, check your frame rate, go into the game, check your frame rate at different settings and see where it's at, and that's a good way to test it. But frame rate is everything, so it's like that in all PC games. So higher frame rate is good. Save up money, buy a better computer, lower your graphics if you can. That's pretty much the name of the game. All right, Kate, well, I'm going to leave it at that, and in the next video, we will continue on our quest to destroy the forest. All right, guys, we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.